What else you got, Lance?
Okay, so speaking of other quarterbacks, so you may remember Marcus Mariota. So in this crazy quarterback carousel of a thing that we have in this offseason, apparently Mariota's market has seemed to have died down. So there were initial rumors of him being shipped out of the Las Vegas Raiders in their efforts to shed some money off their salary cap. But now there seems to be no suitors for Marcus Mariota. So what could be the reason behind this, John?
Well, I'll tell you the reason. There was never a market for Marcus Mariota. This was all started by the general manager, who made a smart play last year by grabbing Mariota as a backup quarterback, and then he realized to himself, well, I have this asset that we never really use. I've got a backup quarterback who maybe could start for some other teams, and if there's any interest out there in somebody getting him, I can get something back for him. I could pick up maybe a third rounder, a fourth round pick, something like that. Somebody willing to pay something for Marcus Mariota. There was a quarterback market out there. It was a really smart play by the GM to get the word out there and say, Marcus Mariota, everyone's talking about Marcus Mariota. Everybody wants Marcus Mariota. Nobody wants Marcus Mariota. It's nothing personal against Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota had his opportunity. He had his chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL and did not play very well. So because of that, I don't think there's a market out there for him at all. So when you're asking me, why did the market dry up? I'm saying the market dried up because it was a rumor that there was ever a market to begin with. This is something that GMs do. You know, they get the word out to one of their favorite writers. Hey, you know, a lot of guys are asking about Marcus Mariota. It's crazy what they're asking for. Hey, you know, we got an offer for Carson Wentz for 2 first rounders. It's crazy what they're asking for what they're offering for Carson Wentz. Hey, this guy's, you know, it's always the same thing. And these things never come to fruition. But our media jumps on it because they don't understand what's happening, or maybe they're complicit in what's going on, and they generate it and they keep it going, and somebody hears it, and then, like we talked about last week, somebody says it, somebody hears it, somebody repeats it, now it's news. So just because somebody repeated what somebody else said doesn't, and there's never any accountability for how often some of these guys are wrong. To me, I wait for Adam Schefter. Schefter's never wrong, very rarely wrong. There's a few guys like that. A lot of the other guys are just they're just shooting in the dark, man. It's a crapshoot with these guys. So if you're asking about Marcus Mariota, I don't think Marcus Mariota had much of a market to begin with. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that. Actually, they even went as far as floating the idea that John Gruden might like Mariota more over Derek Carr, which is unfounded based on stats alone. I mean, Derek Carr has one of the better passer ratings in the NFL, even last season. And there's no way for him to actually beat Derek Carr, talking about Marcus Mariota, for that number 1 job. Here's the problem for Mariota, though. So he will be worth $10 million next season, and that's very steep for a backup quarterback. So if they are trying to shed some money off that salary cap, he might most likely be one of the casualties coming into 2020. So when he gets off the books, the question now is, will any team want him? Will any team get him, even as a backup quarterback? So that's a question that remains to be answered throughout this offseason.
Yeah, guys like Mariota have value. They have value simply for the simple fact that they carry this like high level of experience. So if your starter were to get injured and you had to throw a guy like Mariota in there, you know, maybe you're not expecting superstar quality snaps from the guy, but you know that he's been in situations. He's been to the playoffs. He's a starting quarterback at some point in the NFL. High pressure was on him. He was second overall pick. So yeah, I think Marcus Mariota definitely has a market. Now, if Marcus Mariota assumes that his market is $10 million, Marcus Mariota will not have a job. But if Marcus Mariota assumes that his value is something a little more reasonable, maybe a $2, $3, even $4 million backup, you know, an Andy Dalton type of contract that he could play for forever, I think, because he's a fantastic weapon to come off the bench and be a backup quarterback, because nobody's ready for a guy like that. You know, Marcus Mariota plays almost like a Josh Allen type of game. He was supposed to be Josh Allen. He's supposed to be that big guy who can run, who could throw, and a smart player. He just never developed into that guy. And you know what? Maybe somewhere else under a different OC, different type of offensive plan, he could actually be that guy, but I'm not sure he's going to get the chance. Quarterbacks aren't getting second chances in the NFL anymore unless somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, indeed. There's only 32 jobs that you have in the NFL, and it's hard to fill those positions. You have to be the best of the best in order to get one.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, people aren't giving these guys a second opportunity. You look way back in like going back to even the 70s, you look at a guy like Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw drafted first overall. For that era, one of the greatest quarterbacks of the time, four-time Super Bowl winner. What people forget is that Terry Bradshaw's first 4 years in the NFL were a disaster, an absolute disaster. The fans hated him. The coaches didn't like him. He was a terrible player. There are clips and clips and clips on YouTube right now where you can go and watch Terry Bradshaw making the dumbest mistakes possible, and some oftentimes saving himself by the fact that he was such a physically gifted athlete, which again a lot of people forget. Terry Bradshaw was a Ben Roethlisberger type before Ben Roethlisberger came along. He was a really big guy. He was hard to bring down, really tough player. But he wasn't very good his first 4 years. Peyton Manning was awful his first year. I mean, awful. He still holds the league record for most interceptions by a rookie. I believe it was like 28 interceptions in 16 games. He was terrible. But, there's no patience anymore. There's no patience to see what's going to happen and let these guys develop and get their way into year 2 or even year 3. So the game starts to slow down and they start to stop thinking and start playing. It's like, I need instant gratification right now. You came out, you weren't very good. Like Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen's picked in the top 10 by the Arizona Cardinals a few years ago. The next year, they pick another quarterback. I mean, that guy just never had a chance. He never had a chance to grow into a comfort level for himself. And it just happens more and more now. And guys like Marcus Mariota, unfortunately, I just think fall into that category. And I don't think he's ever going to get another opportunity unless he plays for a team with a guy who's going to get injured. And Mariota comes out and does the same thing that Tannehill did to him, which is comes out and goes, wow, this guy's totally outplaying the guy that he was playing for. So I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening as well for Marcus Mariota.